Patrick Williams. I love talking to artists. I mean, Patrick is an artist in every way. He draws, he paints. Um, I started watching his TEDx, and he talks about growing up in a outside of Omaha farming community and a small house. Had to sleep on the couch. His sisters had a bedroom, and his parents had a bedroom. But he remembers as a young child, being in the woods all the time and starting to understand the relationship of and learning how things looked and how to render them, how to render a 3D object on paper. And he would just start drawing, which leads all to now where he paints these huge paintings and draws every day, puts it on Instagram. But the process of an artist always, 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 always interests me. The blank canvas or the blank page, what do you do with it? I do ask him, is the canvas still blank now? Does it look the same? Is it the same as when you were that child in the farmhouse? But just incredibly inspiring. We talk about the relationship, the intention. Does the artist play a role in what the viewer or the consumer or the listener of the art takes and perceives? But Patrick Williams, absolutely incredible. Please take a look at his art and just wonderful, wonderful inspiration. We talk about who owns the art. He does talk about AI a bit, but just a great conversation. The time went by really, really quickly. Absolutely wonderful. Thanks for listening and watching. Hi, I'm Joey Pinz, and here's my 45-second introduction. After starting my business in the 90s, I started developing poor habits of eating in my diet because of working way too much. Before you know it, I found myself 340 pounds. The doctor told me if I don't lose the weight, I'm not going to see my daughter graduate. Took the next 7 months, lost 130 pounds. People think there's some secret. Ask me, how'd you lose that weight? Like there's some secret. There is no secret. How'd I lose the weight? Just one word: discipline. I've had other successes in life, and I attribute them all to discipline. Now, I'm not the king of discipline, but I believe that it can help all of us. Friends, colleagues convinced me to start a podcast. The podcast mission: how do we better ourselves and society? I talk to interesting people in health, fitness, sport, wellness, business, technology, science, art, and culture. And I eventually ask them how discipline plays a role in their life. Podcast vision: growth through learning from others. Really excited to talk to you, Patrick Williams. Thanks for your time. Where does art come from?
Well, that's such an easy question.
Great.
Yeah, good. Yeah. Starting out easy and we'll work up to something hard, right? Wow. I think art, it comes from within and from without. It's sort of paradoxical. It's simultaneously something that you have to feel, but you also have to tune into the world. If you don't have a relationship both ways, then art isn't going to happen. You have to have a relationship going inward, so you know yourself, and you have to have a relationship to everything else in the world: people, interests, environments, other art, nature, all of those things. And that there's some kind of balance that happens, ideally, and then art happens.
When you say a relationship with yourself, define.
Sure. A healthy person, I believe, must know how they feel. They must know how they think. They must know how they know things or what they want to know. So there has to be a curiosity, I believe. So I think it's both, again, simple and complex.
In this fast-paced MSP landscape, how do you stay ahead? Introducing MSPinfluencer.com, your ultimate hub for MSP news, insights, and community connection, powered by Forza Dash. More than 75,000 MSPs subscribe to our MSP Influencer Pulse weekly newsletter, staying informed and ahead of industry trends. Tune in to emerging podcasts from Joey Pinz and leading MSP voices, offering essential tips, powerful insights, and success stories. Explore our multi-authored blogs, crafted specifically specifically for MSP leaders, delivering fresh perspectives and actionable strategies. Celebrate excellence with the industry-leading Forza-MSP Influence Awards, recognizing innovation, leadership, and impact in the MSP community. Join thousands of MSP professionals who trust MSPinfluencer.com to grow their business and expand their networks. MSPinfluencer.com, where today's MSP leaders connect, collaborate, and conquer, all powered by the Forza platform, helping MSP vendors work effectively with MSPs and helping MSPs grow.
Knowing thyself.
Yeah, know yourself. So when inspiration occurs, Patrick, where does that come from?
That's another easy question, Joey.
Great.
I am fascinated by that question.
Yes, me too.
And I'm asked that a lot, and I've thought about it a lot, and I feel like inspiration happens in a variety of different ways. Inspiration, there's a famous quote by Picasso who said, "Inspiration finds me working." Or you can say, "Inspiration finds you working," which means you gotta be in front of the easel. You have to have the brush in your hand, or the pencil, or the chisel, or the blank staff of music in front of you. And inspiration will find you if you're working. But I also believe that inspiration happens suddenly. There are lots of stories out in the world of how there's a famous story of a French mathematician named Poincaré who was working on a super difficult math problem for weeks, staying up late, gnashing his teeth, pulling his hair, drinking lots of coffee. This was in the, I think, late 1800s. And he said, "Whatever, forget about it." And he said, "I'm going to go out into the country." And he went and got onto essentially, in the story, it says a bus, but I don't think it's a bus how we think of a bus. So it was like a carriage, or maybe even a train. But he said the second he stepped onto the step, it came to him.
Wow.
And he had to rush up to his seat and jot down a whole bunch of notes. So inspiration can be sudden, but we shouldn't wait around for it, right? We should fill our lives with experiences, with people, with books, with film, with podcasts, with all the things that we're curious about and we're interested in, and little tiny inspirations will come from those things. I talk to people a lot about having a space in which they can make essentially a sacred altar, maybe, about inspiration or about creativity or about making something, right? I'm lucky because I have a whole room. It's called my studio, and it's full of wacky things that part of me has no idea why I have them, but I know I like them for some reason, and I keep them, and they rotate. Whenever my wife and I have moved, I pack all these things in boxes, and I call them treasures. And then sometimes when we get to the new place we're going to live, I open up this box of treasures, and it's like, oh my God, I forgot about these treasures, and I put them in my studio, and they make me reflect on the object, whatever it might be. It could be an acorn, it could be a rock, it could be an arrowhead, it could be you name it. It could be a piece of barbed wire. And those are all actually things that I have in my treasures that they spark ideas, but they don't necessarily make sense. You see what I mean? Sometimes in our lives, we get so busy that we stop realizing how important it is to connect to things that don't make sense. So there are dozens of processes that we experience that form a web of ideas inside of our minds, and we have no idea how they might interact. But when they do interact, that's an idea comes to us. And then possibly, if it's a decent idea, we follow that.
Mm.
Probably you could probably reflect on at least a dozen ideas from, I don't know how long you've done a lot of podcasts, but before you started the podcast process, you had ideas that were leading you toward doing a podcast
Mm.
that just came together. One idea came together, and then you thought, "Oh, I that's a great idea." Maybe you wrote it down, or maybe it just stuck with you. And then at some point, you had an idea of like, "I'm going to do a podcast,"
Mm.
and that's the accumulation of a lot of little inspirations
Hmm.
that led to you right there where you are. Does it make sense, right?
Do you believe in the muse?
Oh yeah, for sure. And I think the muse is in I think we have many. I don't know what the plural of muses. Maybe just muses. That
Yeah,
doesn't
maybe.
seem right. Muse. Uh, there's. I feel like we have a number of, in a way, guardian angels, and I think a muse is like a
Hmm.
guardian angel. That I think we each have a friend that is really super connected to creativity. That whenever we need a little nudge, they're here to nudge us. And
Hmm.
sometimes we need a big nudge, sometimes it's just a little nudge. And I think somewhat those nudges are what we call inspiration.
Hmm.
And I don't think it's that they're responsible, right, as a muse of what I create, whoever my muse is. And but I feel like it's a collaboration
Hmm.
that we do we none of us do anything alone. I don't think
Hmm.
it takes little groups and big groups, and sometimes the entire world to get things done. And so our muses are just part of our team. We just can't see them, or sometimes we can see them, I guess, but other times we can't.
I watched your TEDx, Patrick. It was
Mm,
incredible. And you said when you started feeling kind of the, you only knew one artist and it began with Leonardo and ended Da Vinci, right? Your family wasn't into art at all. But you said you spent a lot of time in the woods, and it's a terrible story how eventually it came down. But
mm.
you said you started noticing particularly how things are observed and how you could render them a 3D object on paper. Was this the introduction to the muse to yourself at an early age and you didn't know it?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, there really wasn't any rational or logical reason for me to become so focused on drawing.
Mm.
Like I said, there wasn't anything on our walls. There was one thing on our wall, and I think I say it in the talk, that there's that painting. It was a paint by number. Remember paint by
Oh, that's
numbers?
right.
Yeah, yeah, and it
Jesus,
was of
yeah,
Jesus praying
yeah,
at a rock,
yes.
and that was it. And but somehow I was able to notice that interest inside of me,
Mm,
and somehow feel like the way to the way to do something with that feeling was with a pencil. So I had experiences with crayons and little watercolors that my mom had. I would When she would bake bread, she would smooth out some flour on the table, and I could draw with my
Huh.
finger in the
Huh.
flower. And those are memories from, I had to have been 2 or 3 years old to to be, messing around in the flower because I guess she stopped baking bread later than I was older. So, but anyway, those are there was something in a way. Again, I think part of it is the muse, but part of it I have this theory about our older selves are always helping us at times
Hmm.
with our younger selves. So let's say me now somehow had some little bit of assistance to the 10-year-old boy who was like, "Oh, I want to draw. I'm going to figure out how to draw an apple or whatever, or a plant or a tree or whatever it was, right?" And then that sort of opened a door or a window or exploded the doors and windows, and I just went
Hmm.
completely into my imagination.
Do you think, Patrick, if you were born in New York City, so
Mm,
completely different environment, would you still I mean, it seems to me you were born a creative. You're born an artist. Would you still have discovered that given different environment as a child?
that's a great question. I I think so.
Right.
It's in some ways whatever destiny means. I really feel like it was my calling. I just it's an immense gift for sure. I thank God every day. I thank
Mm.
my parents, as wild and wacky as my upbringing was. I thank my teachers because it all has been supportive. Even the hardships throughout life.
Right.
It was it was the thing making drawings or paintings. It's the thing that's consistent all the way back till I was 10 years old. And then, of course, before that, you know, making little paintings and drawings in school, in grade
Mm.
school. Uh, and my mom kept all those for some reason. I mean,
Wow.
at some point she realized that, oh, wow, yeah, he's got, he's showing a lot of talent. And so she must have been glad that she kept these early things. I have one of those, I have a little tiny watercolor that I did at the kitchen table I have
Hmm.
two older sisters, so they had they may have had a set of watercolors, but I have a little watercolor that I did when I was kind of 2 or 3 years old, and
Wow.
I have it now in my studio, uh, in a box, with a lot of other old drawings. But I think that we are able to help ourselves through these, for better term, sort of a non-physical way to communicate, just like the muses communicate to us,
Mm.
or if people believe in this, and guardian angels help us. I think all of us, if we admit it, we've had times in our lives that was weird.
Mm.
Something strange happened, and somehow I got out of that situation,
Hmm.
and it doesn't make sense unless there was some other forces helping me. So I also believe that our, maybe when I was 20, that 20-year-old helped my 10-year-old. Maybe
Hmm.
when I was 30, my 30-year-old helped my 20-year-old. Just a little bit, just a
Mm.
little.
Mm.
Keep doing that. Keep focusing on that. Keep experimenting here. So I think it's fascinating and complex. We I, I'm working on a manuscript, and I just finished this little section that I felt like I had to add, that says, like a disclosure. I I I think our brains are absolutely amazing. They do incredible things that we have, just the tiniest bit of comprehension of what they're actually doing. But I also think we have a mind and consciousness that isn't dependent on the brain. So
Mm.
I believe our minds and our consciousness is more than our brain or our physical body.
Hmm.
So if you believe that, then there's all kinds of things that are possible, right?
Mm.
And if you believe that, then something like telepathy is possible, or out of body experiences, or
Mm.
remote viewing. All those things are possible. But if you're strictly a materialist, meaning that you only think that your brain and the electrical, chemical activities in your brain are responsible for consciousness, then those other things aren't really possible, and you have to try to explain them away by coincidence, or
Hmm.
oh, that was just your imagination or hallucination or whatever. So uh, I had a friend. We played tennis a whole bunch in Boulder, and we had fun arguing. It was never heated or anything, but we he just loved to bring up things. And it took me about a year, and I realized, oh, Alex, I know what the core of our disagreement is. And he said, what? And I said, you believe the brain is where consciousness comes from, that it's brain dependent. And he said, well, of course, yeah. And I said, well, I don't. And
Mm.
so after that, we would always circle back to that point of saying, "Oh yeah, that's the reason you believe that, and this is the reason I believe this." And for me, it has made in a in a big way, it's made my art, I feel, more full. Partly from where you started, of art is how we make relationships, and if I feel like I have something in me that is more than just my physical body. Physical bodies are awesome. I love having my physical body, and I want to keep it for as long as I can. But I feel like I am more than that.
Hmm.
And thus I feel like I can generate creative expressions that add from that non-physical realm, and I can put that into my artwork.
Hmm. That's wonderful. That battle you talk about is just classic art versus science. It seems to me, by the way, that you had with Alex. Um, so when you were a child, you were outside of Omaha. You're in a farmhouse. Your sisters had one bedroom. Your parents had another. You were on the couch, and you discover you say the woods are your friends and the trees, and you discover and you're drawing. And I think Snoopy was your specialty, and uh, is it the same? The question is, what do you do with the blank canvas, Patrick? But is it the same blank canvas then than it is now?
Mm, that's a cool question, Joey. I love that question. Yeah. I don't think anybody's ever asked me that question. That's a beautiful question. In some ways, yeah.
Hmm.
I believe so. I believe, and my wife and I talk about this a lot. She's a writer, and she also does photography and digital work. She's super talented. And we talk about the blank page. And
Hmm.
we've talked about the blank page with respect to writing a little bit more than what you just asked. But
Canvas.
but the blank piece of paper or the blank canvas is in some ways the same as it was with that piece of typing paper, right? That instead of print paper, that it was just typing paper back then, right? And and having that on the table, and a pencil, a number two pencil. I didn't know until later that there are different kinds of pencils
Hmm.
that
Hmm.
people who draw use. So sitting there with that, or sitting there with the blank canvas,
Hmm.
compared to now, is on one level the same, because the blank is the blank, right? It's empty. In a way, every blank canvas is a masterpiece
Hmm.
until we make the first mark. And then it starts to change. And usually it's starting to move away from masterpiece rather than toward it. If
Hmm.
sometimes, if we're lucky, we everything balances out, and something magical happens, right? But on one level, it is the same, but then on another level, it is different. I have
Mm.
51 years of
Yeah.
painting and,
Yes.
you know, 55 years of drawing experience or more, 56 years of drawing experience. So I'm not really intimidated anymore. I can't
Mm.
remember when the last time I was intimidated. I don't know if I've ever been intimidated by a blank canvas.
Good for you.
Even large. I did two large drawings in 1999 for a show. Uh, I started them. I started the first one in January and the second one in June. And these drawings, I had a very large studio in Seattle, Washington, and the drawings were 80 inches high and 300 inches long.
Wow.
So a little over 6 feet, 6.5 feet high, and 25 feet long. I had been thinking. I had this roll of paper that was 50 feet long and 80 inches high for 3 or 4 years, and I had an experience at seeing a gallery in Omaha, and a woman invited me to have a show, and she opened the door for me to go in to see the gallery, and I saw this wall that was 30 feet long and 12 feet high, and I saw what had been thinking about,
Whoa.
the river god on that wall. It was the perfect wall for that. So I wasn't when I put that piece of paper up on it, 24,000 square inches of paper, 153 square feet.
Wow.
When I put it up on the wall, I wasn't intimidated at all. I was excited. I was like,
Hmm.
"Oh my god, I can't wait." I know exactly where the river god is, but I wasn't sure what else was going to happen. But it flowed, literally it flowed together like a river.
Hmm.
And then in June I realized that, wow, I need to do the river goddess. And I had the other half of the roll. I put it up, and that flowed together also. So when I have a blank canvas, I'm not intimidated about by it, and I'm approaching it with all the years, all the canvases, all the goofs, mistakes, the failures, all the successes, all the achievements, all the celebrations. All of those are combined when I'm standing in front of the canvas.
Hmm.
Recently, what's been interesting is that, not that I've been intimidated or scared by my project that I started about 2 years ago, which was doing portraits. I'd never done portraits
Oh, I
before.
saw
I
those.
did I did one self portrait years ago, like 30 some years ago, and my wife had been anxious for me to do portraits. She said, "You'll be great at portraits. I think you'll." And this she we'd been married, 23 years then, 2 years ago, and she was like, "You need to." And I finally thought, "Okay, I need to." And it was like climbing El Capitan.
Hmm.
Even after all these years of painting, it was the hardest thing I've ever attempted in painting.
Wow.
And it still challenges me. I've only been doing it for almost 2 years now, but it's unimaginably challenging. So when I'm in front of a blank canvas and I'm going to do a portrait, I have a little anxiety, excuse me, because there's so many things that you have to get correct: proportion,
Hmm.
expression, and personality, possibly.
Hmm.
Excuse me. So it's not necessarily that I'm uh, intimidated, but I'm a little bit more cautious in
Hmm.
in how I'm approaching.
If we go back to that river god, you said that you saw the image of the person and the river,
Mm,
but when does the brush take over for everything else? Do you start while you're doing that?
mm.
Do you start seeing those other areas start to fill in your mind, and you're just following your mind, or is the brush taking over? Describe that process to me,
Sure,
please.
sure. That's a good question. So with this particular, I I was I was inside of uh, a new framework of
Hmm.
making art that
Hmm.
sort of started in about 1995 with uh, a really wild experience that I had that I've written a little story about it and that maybe I can send you and people can link up to it. It's called The
Please.
Spectator. Okay. And from that experience, I catapulted myself into looking at Renaissance art,
Mm.
focused on the figure, just looking at how anybody and everybody was drawing or painting the figure.
Hmm.
Nude, clothed, it didn't matter. I just went deeply into studying that work. And that led me by probably mid 1998, all I was looking at was Michelangelo.
Hmm.
I was reading about his life. I was collecting books of Michelangelo. I was looking at his sculpture, looking at his paintings. I was learning by absorbing his work. By the time I got the show in in Christmas of 98 is when I crashed a Christmas party, and the people there, they convinced me to meet this gallerist, and I went to the gallery. She opens the door,
Hmm.
and that's when I see the river god. So I had been thinking about this, but it's a little tiny clay sculpture that still exists from Michelangelo, and then another artist drew from that sculpture, and maybe drew from a drawing that Michelangelo did that we don't have anymore. And I love this image.
Hmm.
It was really raw and tough, and from mythology. Michelangelo did work in mythological characters, but also in Christian
Yes.
iconography. So I was fascinated by this. I had done a bunch of drawings that were up and down. They were 100 inches tall and 60 inches wide, so
Hmm.
8 feet by 5 feet. But they were always uh, vertical. But I had this big roll of paper that was horizontal, and I saw the wall. I thought I could cut it in half, and I knew I would put the river god on one side of it, on the right
Wow.
side of it. And then it's the process of me thinking about the theme of a river. The show was going to be in Omaha, Nebraska, where I grew up, where I'm living right now. And the Missouri River is a major part of Omaha. Sometimes it's called the River City. Uh, so I wanted a kind of rhythm to flow through the piece.
Hmm.
I had been using figures and hands from all these Renaissance and mainly Michelangelo. So there would be a figure of Christ and his hand from the Pietà, one of Michelangelo's pieces. So I I look through the characters. So this is telling you how I built this, right? I
Yes.
look through the characters in his work that
Wow.
had a connection to water. And so Jonah from that
Hmm.
story,
The
Jonah,
Bible. Yeah.
yep, and the prophet. Give me a second. It's been a long time since I've. Uh,
Not Poseidon.
no, Daniel.
Oh, Daniel.
Daniel is on the ceiling, and no, I don't think. I'll double check.
Sure.
But one of the prophets that's on the ceiling, on the uh, Sistine Chapel ceiling,
Ah,
is connected to water in some of his stories.
Peter?
Nope, he's not
And
on the ceiling.
anyway,
Anyway,
sorry.
uh, and then one of Jesus's hands, he has the changing water into wine,
Right.
and other sort of water connected
Wash the
baptism, etc.
feet. Wash the
Wash the
feet.
feet. Yeah. So
Yes.
so
Yeah.
many so many connections
Yeah.
to water. So
Baptism.
yep, I I overlaid those hands onto the paper. So these hands are probably
Wow.
6 to 8 feet long, some of them,
Wow.
and they on the right side of the paper. This is graphite on paper, so pencil on paper.
Wow.
On one side, it's super busy. There's the river god, and that's in connection to, in a way, the pagan religions and
Hmm.
of where sacredness and worship evolved from when 100,000 years ago. So it's sort of the story of how spirituality or religion or faith flows through our lives and eventually brings us to some point of healing or a wakefulness or
Wow.
a positivity. And I'll send you the link of the river god and the river goddess, and an interesting story connected to the river goddess. When we agreed to have the show, and I got schematics of the gallery. It was a big gallery space. Got the schematics, and I had toured, the walls and had a good sense of what it looked like. I got back to Seattle. I re-drywalled my wall. My wall was 55 feet long and 13 feet high. It was a huge
Wow.
loft space in Seattle. I had 20-foot windows at one end. It was like a long uh, Kleenex box shape,
I
right?
see.
And was legal live-in space. I lived there, and my wife eventually lived there for a little bit after we met. And we met at this show, which is a whole other story
Oh,
that is
wow.
pretty wild.
Wow.
Uh, but I, in January, I did the River God, and I did maybe 7 or 8 more drawings that were the 100 inches by 60 inches.
Hmm.
Then I thought, you know what? I need to do the River Goddess, but I knew that there wasn't space in the gallery.
Hmm.
But I thought, you know what? I have to do this. So I looked through Michelangelo's work and arranged uh, the characters, so to speak, with the
Wow.
figure in the hands. And she's called Aurora or Dawn, and it's from a sculpture. He only did 2 women marble sculptures,
Hmm.
and they're in the Medici tomb in Florence, and they're on the tombs of 2 of the Medicis. And so I chose her to represent the opposite, in a way, of the river god. So she's
Hmm.
the river. I turned her into the river goddess, and then chose 4 hands from the Sistine Chapel ceiling and from uh,
Wow.
Mother Mary. They were all female hands from his work. And I made the drawing in June of 1999, and in it was opening in late August, and I shipped it out. I shipped everything out the end of July, and I hesitated, and I thought, oh, why should I send it? I had
Hmm.
these big tubes that I was sending all the drawings in. And I thought, you know what, I'm going to send it. And so it got there. I flew into Seattle. I flew from Seattle to Omaha, got into the gallery, and it was the day to put the show up. And we got everything going, and then I rolled out the River Goddess, and the woman, the gallerist Annie, she said, "God, we have to figure out how to put this up."
Right.
And there was a wall that was about probably 20 or 21 feet long, and the space had studios in the back, and there was a curtain, and around the corner there was a false wall that you could slide out that was about 5 feet wide and about 8.5, 9 feet tall, that we slid up, butted up against the wall that was part of the gallery, and it fit the river goddess
Wow.
perfectly. Yeah, so that was kind of a magical moment. And the other part of the story is that when my future wife walked by the gallery, it was the last day, the last hour of the show. That's the image she saw when
Wow.
she looked in. She saw the river goddess, and she walked by and she said she felt like a hand was on her back that brought her back, and she said, "Oh, I'm going to go in there and check that out." So in that was a long story to
Yeah.
say how the process of building a piece of art sometimes happens.
Hmm.
Sometimes uh, it's it's as I did a painting of General Washington a
Saw
year
that.
ago,
Yeah.
little over a year ago, and I used a painting that John Trumbull did in 1791, and I didn't like he was holding a spyglass in his hand, and it just looked goofy.
Hmm.
And then there's another version of the same painting that either he did or somebody else did, and they stuck a sword in his hand. And I thought that looks goofy. I'm going to put the American flag in his hand. So he's holding a flagpole with the flag behind him, the 13-star flag behind him, like covering the whole top of the canvas.
Hmm.
And then I had to figure out, well, what else is happening? You know,
Hmm.
it some I the beginning was fine, but a painting has to be more than that. That again back to the relationship. What is the relationship that I'm trying to build to show General Washington,
Hmm.
to show the flag, to give a sense of what's going on? You know, why is he where is he? Why is he there? And what's happening? So that's sometimes how a painting is built. Sometimes it's like me seeing the river god on the wall. It's like, oh
Hmm.
yeah, this is it. I've been waiting for this, something to do with that big piece of paper.
Hey, Joey Pinz here. Want to take your podcast experience to the next level? I'm excited to invite you to become a YouTube member. It's the absolute best way to support the channel and enhance your connection. Join our amazing community and unlock the incredible perks, custom loyalty badges, exclusive emojis, and priority comment replies. Your voice will always stand out. Be the first to watch new videos with early access, receive special membership shoutouts, and get exclusive behind the scenes photos and updates. Dive into content available only to our members, special videos, deep dives, and insider perspectives. Engage directly with me. Suggest podcast topics you want to hear, and even get personalized video shoutouts. Hit the join button right now and become part of something special. Let's build this amazing community together. I can't wait to welcome you as a new member. Join the Joey Pinz family today. When you create a piece like that, Patrick, I want to talk about intention for a moment. You know, you created. I see what kind of work you've done. You're tying all these ends together. You know, you have a theme that's happening. Does it does it matter what the viewer sees? I just
Mm,
give you a quick. So, I mean, I love going to museums, but here's the problem, Patrick.
mm,
It feels like there's 200 concerts going on at the same time. You know,
mm,
I look at a painting and I want to kind of soak it in, and I want to, see what I see, hear what I hear. And then I feel like I go to the next one. It's almost like, between sushi, you have to have that piece of, ginger to cleanse, you want to cleanse yourself, then kind of take a new one in. If somebody takes away something that you didn't intend in a piece, does that bother you? Talk to me about artist intention.
mm. Another super question, Joey. Yeah, fabulous. I love the your description that helped me a lot to know how to speak with people about this. When you said it's like 200 concerts going on at the same time. That's
Yeah,
a
yeah.
perfect way to, because it is, and that's part of what is so challenging about painting or drawing, is that if you're at a concert, there's a beginning and an end. It doesn't matter
Mm,
if it's a punk band or if it's classical music. They, they're going to start and they're going to stop. But with a painting, the whole thing is there all at once. So
Right.
how do I orchestrate it? And then what's the experience of the orchestration from
Mm.
your point of view, from the viewer's point of view, and the intention? That It's such a great question. Uh, I have no idea what people
Right. Do you care?
experience. Yeah. Well, sure, I care, but I'm always curious about what they experience.
Mm.
What what do they notice? What do they? My wife and I just had this conversation, and I'm reading a book on Michelangelo right now, and he was very protective of anybody seeing his work.
Hmm.
On the other hand, Da Vinci, he'd like have parties. Like, come on
Oh,
in, check out what
oh,
I'm doing.
yeah,
So
Italians.
yeah, yeah, right. So I'm with respect to art, I'm more like Da Vinci, and it's like,
Hmm.
come on in. I mean, I'm working on this piece behind me,
Looks
right?
so
And
cool. Yeah.
and I'm okay for you and all of your viewers to see it in its unfinished state. It's
Mm.
just getting going. And my wife is like, no, she's like Michelangelo. You're not going to see it. I'm
Mm.
When I'm ready for you to see it, then I'll show it to you, and it's going to
Mm.
be good, but you got to wait.
Mm.
So the intention is uh, important, obviously, clearly, and again, it relates to that first question about relationships. It's
Hmm.
what is the relationship do I want to build with the viewer, whoever the viewer might be. I don't know who the viewer is going to be. I don't, but I have to have a place that I know the piece of art is, right?
Mm.
So as I'm building this painting, I have from a total blank slate. I have the the inspiration of this piece was a church here in Omaha called the Immaculate Conception.
Hmm.
That they have this barrel vaulted ceiling, half circle ceiling that goes all the way to the wall where the altar is, but at the top of it, it's blank.
Hmm.
It's a half circle blank. And my wife and I went there like maybe 3 years ago, and I was just struck. The church is beautiful, but I
Hmm.
was struck by, wow, wouldn't it be awesome to have a painting up there?
Hmm.
And so I came home, a couple weeks thinking about it. I got a piece of plywood and I cut it into a half circle, and then I did a few sketches on it, and then it just sat for literally 2.5 years, 3 years
Wow.
almost. And then I thought, you know what? It's time for me to work on this. I'm in the right space. And so my intention was to, on one hand, make, for better terms, a Renaissance painting of the Immaculate Conception.
Hmm.
And there aren't a lot of paintings out there from the Renaissance of that moment, but I thought, okay, that's cool. I'll just wing it. So I had to start developing what was going to be in the painting. So my intention was to, in a way, honor this theological moment, but then it had to be more than that, right? So I started thinking about, well, she's somewhat like a goddess from ancient times. And
Hmm.
so I started looking at some of the objects that the goddesses in Greece or in Egypt would have. And going further back, there are just a tremendous amount. They call them Venus sculptures. The Venus of Willendorf is a like a super sumptuous, roundish female figure that they some people believe they our ancient ancestors worshipped, or they kept on a altar as sacred to energize fertility, or energize the season of hunting and gathering, or whatever it might be. But they knew that there was something connected to divinity that was connected to the female,
Hmm.
right? So Earth really seems like it's a feminine energy because it gives us all this bounty and such. So it makes sense that goddesses were worshipped in such a way. And so I thought, well, I want to honor some of that. I want to honor some of the stories, like
Mm.
over. No, it's on this side of the can. No, no, on this side of the canvas, down low will be some of those Venuses of Venus.
Hmm.
There's all kinds of little tiny sculptures. They're just like this big. Some of them smaller. So I'm going to have some of those, and I'm going to in the middle, right behind me. There's going to be some objects that are from Greek and Egyptian sacred goddess sculpture. So I'm tying this loop together of how the worship of the divine in our conception, part of it must be feminine, and honoring that, just like Mary is a more contemporary honoring of that
Mm.
rendition of the holiness of the divine feminine, so to speak. I'm That's a loaded term in some ways.
Sure,
In
sure.
in a way, so is the whole conversation right
Right,
now.
right,
But
right.
but my intention is to, when I'm building this painting, is to include things in it that people can be curious about. It's like, well, why? As an example, with the General Washington painting, I have a gun, a pistol that, well, not a pistol, but a flintlock, whatever they're called, pistol that he was given by a general. I have his favorite stool. I have his favorite pewter mug. I have part of his tent. I have his war chest that he carried stuff in. So all these things,
Hmm.
it's like a scene in a theater piece. Like what are the props that we need? So in the painting behind me, I'm looking and I'm selecting and I'm thinking about what are all these props that will make this painting flow together and be interesting, not just be merry floating in the clouds, you know. It has to be more than that.
Mm.
So my intention is to give the viewer a lot of things to contemplate
Hmm.
rather than just one thing. It's but from going back to your question, I don't know what the viewer's response or reaction to these objects will be,
Hmm.
whether they will be contemplative or reactionary? Will some Catholics be offended by
Mm.
me including the Venus of Willendorf, or the rattle, the Sesmet rattle, or these other objects? Uh, I even have it's probably can't see it, but right here is a little lamb
Mhm.
that's on a carpet. And I envisioned and I have little carpets right behind me that a whole bunch of objects will be placed on. And I thought, oh, what if I have the carpet just floating in the air with the lamb, which represents Christ, which is
Of
connected to
course.
Mary, and then on this side I have the three gifts that were brought in from the Magi. So I
Mm.
have these Catholic
Wow.
icons, but they're not. The whole painting is not strictly a Catholic celebration. It's
Right.
more of a celebration of what does that part of God that is feminine, how do we relate to that? I
Hmm.
mean, that's a big question. How do we relate to God anyway? I think it's
Mm.
impossible. We just like, all right, thank you. And that's as much as our concepts can approach, possibly, or celebrating it, like with a painting or with a piece of music or whatever it might be, a poem, or doing a podcast. In some ways that's you celebrating your connection to the divine.
Mm.
You're doing this work that is meaningful, and you're bringing people together, and people are connecting. That I love that. To me, that's in some ways doing God's work. Doing
Hmm.
the work that we're here to do. So when I'm my intention, and then when people come to a piece, I don't know what they're gonna experience, and it's fine with me if they're upset, if they say, "Oh, I think it's sacrilegious for you to include those pagan objects. That's being sacrilegious, or
Hmm.
that's attacking Mary. That's disparaging her, or whatever." And I'm I honor that. That's fine for you to feel that way.
Hmm.
Why do you feel that way? Tell me more about how that makes you feel, or what what's disturbing about it. I'm way more interested in hearing what people are experiencing from my work than trying to tell them what it's about. I mean, I get
Hmm.
excited about what I'm making and what I'm including, but then there's I've gone through different levels of linking this back to the river god and the river goddess. I would go through different levels when showing the work of telling people that all of these images are from Michelangelo.
Hmm.
They're from a sculpture, they're from a painting. But then sometimes I'm just so excited to share where they came from and how I put them together, like you asked, which was a great question. That I just talk about, yeah, they're from Michelangelo. And
Hmm.
they were a way in which I was able to relate to him in a different way, as like a a woman named Uchida. She's a concert pianist. My wife and I saw her in Chicago years ago, and she plays, part of her repertoire is Mozart. And I felt it must be the same when someone like Uchida or Daniel Barenboim plays Mozart or Beethoven or Bach, because they're playing the same things that those composers played and wrote. So it's a very intimate connection to be performing.
Hmm.
There, I believe, in some cases, and people feel it in the audience when Uchida really merges deeply with Mozart. You can feel something extra.
Hmm.
And that's what my part of my intention was with Michelangelo, was to have a different kind of conversation with him, to draw, literally to draw the lines that he drew, to to feel how he put that hand together, how he put the
Hmm.
lines together, how he put the river god together, how he put Christ on flowing through the clouds together, whatever it might be. It was a way that I was able to, in some ways, not only learn from him as a mentor, but to make friends with him,
Hmm.
to have a different kind of communication that linked us more deeply than simply reading about him,
Hmm.
or thinking about him, or looking at his work. I think it's important. For me, art history is absolutely imperative to making art.
Hmm.
To not know your history if you're an artist is to not be complete.
Hmm.
In my book, it has guided me and educated me, and frustrated me,
Hmm.
and inspired me, and forced me to push myself.
So, Patrick, let's talk about that for a second. Kind of relationship and ownership. There's a wonderful story how Bob Dylan wrote "Along the Watchtower,"
Mm,
and within weeks, he saw Jimi Hendrix perform it. And when he saw him perform it, he said, "That song was never mine." and he never performed it again. He said that was his song. It came to me. It shouldn't have, and it should have been his. So when we talk,
Mm.
relationship and ownership, and is every artist a thief? I mean, right? I mean, you talk about your relationship with Michelangelo, it inspires in your relationship there. But that story itself, it gives me chills every time I think about it. But it's just, so it came to him, but it's not his. It was Jimmy's,
Mm.
and it belongs to him. And he refused to ever play it again, and refused to take ownership of it.
Yeah,
Amazing to me.
totally. Yeah, and I agree. You're right. Uh, there is, and it's well, for I will get to, and remind me if I get too far off course, but I want to talk about AI and this
Okay.
connection also.
Okay.
But yeah, this is such a another fabulous question, Joey. Uh, my wife and I talk about this quite a bit
Mm.
because she's a remarkable photographer, an incredibly in-depth street photographer,
Hmm.
but for the past maybe 2 years now, she has used a few tools to manipulate photographs by way of story. It's some app, but she says she sometimes feels like she is not a real artist because some of it's being generated.
Interesting.
And so the relationship, the ownership is seems to be fuzzy in her perspective, but from my perspective it is absolutely authentic
Mhm.
and and unique, and she alters, if she does take something, when appropriation, this was big in the art world about maybe 30 years ago. It started a little bit, well, it's always been, it has always existed. We have always been taking, borrowing or stealing from other artists. We have to. I mean, this this peacock is going to look different, but it's taken directly from Botticelli.
Hmm.
He has a peacock, and it's very subtle, but he has a peacock that has Mother Mary in the painting, and that's one of her representations. But we there's only been one visual artist who didn't steal, and in some ways she took from nature.
Hmm.
And that's the first woman who made a painting on a wall. Many of them were women who made those paintings in the cave walls.
Interesting.
But ever since that, we've been stealing from her.
Hmm.
You know, it's just been a series of us stealing all the way back in history to 38,000 years ago or whatever, 40,000, 50, 60. We'll discover older paintings. Uh, so we're always borrowing or stealing from other artists. We have to. Well, we don't have to, but it's it's part of the conversation.
Hmm.
So so ownership gets, like with the Dylan song. I totally feel how true that is. Right? We
Hmm.
all know it. I mean, I think Hendrix knew it, and Dylan knew it, and everybody who's heard the song knows it. Uh, or like the song Hallelujah. How many people have covered Hallelujah?
Sure.
And far better than Cohen.
Hmm.
His voice is like Dylan's voice, or
Right.
Neil Young's voice. You have to learn to love it in a way.
Mick
Uh,
Jagger. Yeah.
so that ownership is is flexible in a way, and
Hmm.
art needs to have that flexibility of ownership to an extent. And I'm remembering myself to come back to it, except with the AI process that's happening,
Hmm.
because AI, the program is has been turned loose to it's something worse than stealing,
Hmm.
because stealing, people actually often find out, like if if somebody steals your car during the night and you come out and you don't have your car there, you know somebody stole my car,
Right.
but if people are find I have had images stolen already
Wow.
by AI. So people don't even know their work is being stolen. There's a different there's a I'll come up at some point with a new word for this, of
Mm.
how the algorithm is taking things that don't belong to them, and they don't have the right to take them, let alone obviously the copyright. Things are copyrighted by
Mm.
existence. You can buy a copyright to something, but because I made it, it has a quality of copyrightedness to it.
Hmm.
So when AI, when the programmers wrote that into the algorithm to search and find something inside of a description and then just take it,
Hmm.
that was absolutely unforgivably wrong.
Wow.
And that's that's neither making a relationship or nor ownership. The
Mm.
ownership belongs to the artist
Mm.
always, and the artist can sign over either partial ownership or full ownership, but it always in is the artist's.
Hmm.
And when the program takes something from an artist, there's no relationship, there's
Mm.
no negotiation. The
Mm.
artist doesn't say, "Oh, sure, I'll sell it to you for $100, $1,000, $100,000, or whatever," or "No, you can't have it."
Mm.
It's like
Mm.
somebody coming in. If, like right now, if somebody came into my studio and just walked over, General Washington is hanging on my wall right now, and just picked it up and walked out. That's
Hmm.
AI.
Wow.
AI is doing that to the digital studios, the digital archives of artists all over the world, uh, and it's wrong in a word, uh, and I think it can be mitigated. I know it can be mitigated. All it has to change is the code in the software,
Hmm.
and then it will stop. You know, AI is just it's only algorithms.
Right.
I can get on a giant soapbox
Yeah.
with AI, and it's a great tool. Like a knife is a great tool
Mm.
until somebody takes it and stabs somebody. And AI right now is stabbing. The
Mm.
programmers of AI are
Mm.
stabbing a lot of
Mm.
people right now that shouldn't be, and not only artists, not only visual artists, but it's a tragedy.
Yeah.
And another thing, one more thing to think about:
Sure.
AI. This is not uh, 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 my original thinking, but there's going to be a point in AI, and we're starting to see it, especially with respect to uh, information, that AI has been using everything that's on the net to a degree, all these human made things,
Right.
but soon AI is going to be reading AI stuff
Its own.
and
Yeah.
then spitting it back out, which will be absolutely unbelievable gibberish, because the little mistakes will be accelerated into bigger mistakes.
Mm.
So AI is a it's computers are great tools, but they're not the solution to problems, or they can give us they can certainly snoop through data quickly, and that's great. It saves you know hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of people hours. So
Mm.
those kinds of things are great, but making images or stealing images, that's not okay. That's my more than
Yeah.
2 cents.
I appreciate that. When I think of large language models like this, and I think about it getting books, getting newspaper articles, getting all these blogs, but I should also think it's also getting artwork. I don't think of images, but it certainly is.
Yeah.
Has there been anything in the last month or so, Patrick, that you changed your mind on?
Oh, that's a cool question. Uh, there must be. I bet there are several things. Uh, that's a great question. Wow. Huh. Well, I think, yeah, there. I have changed my mind on, and this may be a little longer than a month. You said a month, right?
Well,
Yeah, yeah,
recent,
yeah,
recent.
yeah, yeah. On the manuscript that I'm writing, I've
Ah,
shifted from trying to write a book to just putting my ideas down,
hmm,
uh, and that makes a lot more sense to me because
hmm,
obviously I'm a visual person, so I can think in. I'm much better now being able to think in stories that I could actually tell. Uh, so that has helped in putting the manuscript together. It's on creativity, but I've changed my mind and I'm not I'm giving up writing a book and I'm just gonna put a whole bunch of stories together and
hmm,
a bunch of thoughts about what I think is creativity. Like I said earlier on, I had this moment in what I was writing, the way I wrote it, I thought, you know what? Here's the perfect little spot for me to say, oh, just to be clear, I think brains are cool, but I think minds are something different than brains. Just so
hmm,
people at the
hmm.
beginning of the book will kind of understand where my point of view is. So that's I've changed my and that was a big decision. It's like
Yeah, sure is.
don't try to make a book. Don't try to write a
Yeah.
book anymore. Just put your stories and your thoughts together and it'll be what it is.
So, Patrick, I started my business in the '90s, and I was working way too hard and putting my health in the back seat, and poor diet and sleeping habits. And so, next thing you know, I'm at the doctor. I'm at 340 pounds, and she says to me, if you don't lose this weight, you're not going to see your daughter graduate. My daughter was just born, so it scared the life out of me. Not only, I can abuse myself all I want, right? But now I have this child, I have a
Right.
wife, I have this, I have to look much beyond myself. So I took, driving home, punching the steering wheel. What have I done? So it took the next 6, 7 months, lost about 130 pounds. And, you can't look at it as a finishing line with these kind of things. It's life changes,
Sure.
it's permanent changes. So when I tell people the story, I always hear right, I get the look, what's your secret? What'd you do? And there's no secret, Patrick. Discipline. That's how I did. I got a motivation, focus, willpower, etc. How does discipline play a role in your life, Patrick Williams?
Yeah, that's what that's in a word, uh the and more than a word. That's what excited me about having this conversation with you
Uh,
because your focus on discipline and discipline has been a major part in my life. I
hmm,
really feel it. Uh I think both from lots I can see it when I look back and see how growing up on I say farm, but it wasn't a big farm or my dad had he worked at the Metropolitan Utilities District
hmm,
and as a laborer. So, but we had hogs. We farrowed hogs. We had a couple steers. We had sometimes we'd have some sheep, some goats, some a menagerie. We had chickens when we were growing up. When I was growing up, so it was a farm, and then he planted seed corn or feed corn that he would use or he would sell. He would, and that was uh, renting acreage that he would do that on. So it was just in his blood. He grew up that way.
hmm,
So I felt I feel thankful now. At the time, of course, I didn't. When I was 10 and having to go, bale hay with him, or pick corn or whatever it might be, uh, or take care of the hogs or take care of the steers, do the chores. I wasn't that excited about it then, but now I know how important it was to giving me that sense of discipline and how you had to show up. Uh, and then self teaching myself how to draw, there was a certain kind of discipline that was surprising for a kind of a wacky 10-year-old kid,
Mm.
and sticking with it. And then in high school, I I taught ice skating to elementary school kids. And I
Hmm.
did that all 3 years of high school. And that was a whole another world of taking what I knew, and then the discipline it takes to figure out how to tell little kids
Hmm.
how to do that, how to move on ice. so so that taught me a lot about discipline.
Wow.
And then when I got to college, literally my first college class in 1977, 8:30 in the morning, Monday, whatever, August, whatever it was a karate class. And martial arts is discipline.
Yes.
It's personal fortitude. If you don't push yourself, if you don't have the discipline to push yourself, you won't you won't make it very far. You
Mm.
won't progress.
Mm.
And then the discipline after that was, a lifelong dedication to making paintings. And that takes a discipline to show up at the easel, to that blank canvas, to the
Yeah,
blank
it sure
page.
does.
And there's a
Amazing.
and there's each part of those disciplines, even the even as annoyed and resistant I was when I was young to do the farm work, there was a kind of excitement to it. There was a
Mm.
kind of
Mm.
reward,
Mm.
personally, that I did good today. I got up and fed the hogs, or you know
Mm.
we went out and baled hay, and that would be weeks of that. Uh, putting up a fence. I can put up a fence. I can build a fence
Wow.
for anybody, barbed wire or plank or whatever, because my dad taught me how to do that. I
Mm.
built fences enough with him that I know how to do that. But that's a discipline,
Sure
but
is.
it's so rewarding. Uh, each of those each of those cases of teaching myself to draw, ice skating, teaching karate, learning karate, and then eventually teaching it, learning aikido, and eventually teaching it. All those disciplines are so rewarding.
Mm.
So, and that's, I think, this is maybe something that uh, is a question back to you. Have people talk to you about discipline and how rewarding it is? Because I feel like that's one of the parts of discipline that people don't realize
Mm.
is a gift.
Mm.
That people often think of discipline like, oh, it's so much hard work. But as you know from being disciplined, you're 130, 40 pounds lighter, right? You're a healthier human being. That is something to celebrate. And still, right? You're not 300 pounds.
Right.
And that's celebration. That is a reflection of your discipline that is so, I think, not talked about enough. Not talked about, and especially these days. Oh my God, it's crazy how distant people are from uh, understanding that to work hard is there are rewards to it, but you still have to put in the work.
Mm.
You have to. I'm getting a black belt in the dojo in particular that I was part of. It was hardcore.
Yeah.
This was old school karate. This wasn't uh, like a studio atmosphere that a lot of schools that have lots of trophies. We went to tournaments, but we weren't. If we won a trophy, it went in the closet. It didn't go up on some mantle or whatever. but the blood, sweat, and tears that goes into discipline is rewarding. In looking back at it, certainly rewarding. It's hard to notice in the middle, right?
Mm,
It's like, oh my God, this is how long am I going to have to do this? How am I done yet? Or all these questions. But when you have a chance, I think it's so important to look at how you have employed discipline in your life or are employing it right now. Obviously, there's a lot of discipline in doing a podcast. I so much respect you guys, you all, that that do, and especially people like you who know part of me, and
right.
that's so meaningful to me. For
Mm,
you to know my TEDx talk, for you to know you've looked at my work, you have built a relationship with me before
yes.
we started, and that takes discipline,
Mm.
and that's special. There's something special to that you should, later today, just remember this moment and say, you know what, I am really good at doing this, and I'm reaping the rewards of my discipline. So
Mm. Want to show your love for discipline, inspiration, and the Joey Pinz podcast? Now's your chance. Introducing the brand new Joey Pinz merch store, where style meets discipline. Choose from premium apparel, cozy hoodies, stylish hats, durable bags, and your new favorite coffee mug, all featuring the iconic Joey Pinz logo. Perfect for podcast fans, discipline enthusiasts, or as unique gifts for friends and family. Every purchase supports the Joey Pinz Discipline Conversations podcast, helping us continue to inspire greatness and promote positive change. Visit joeypins.com/store today and wear your discipline proudly. Joey Pinz merch. Wear it, share it, and live it. I think the beauty of it, Patrick, is that there's no wrong answer.
no.
I had this ongoing theme that discipline is a spectrum, and
Mm,
I'm doing studying on it, and I'm actually writing something about it to be released soon. But you're right, though, it is so rewarding, and I could talk to somebody in the military who have a very different view of discipline, and I could talk to a wonderful artist like yourself
mm.
who have a different definition, but it's still discipline. It's
Still
still
discipline.
there. It's
Yeah,
still discipline. It doesn't matter.
absolutely.
I was looking forward to this conversation. I'm so glad we talk. I can't wait to see the new work you come out with. Thank you so much for your time today. Anybody listening, watching, how can they get in touch with you?
Sure, that's a great question. I love getting emails. So Patrick at patrickwilliams.com. That's my email. I have patrickwilliams.com. I have celebrationflowerpaintings.com and
Patrick Williams Creative.
Patrick Williams Stay Creative. Yes,
Stay
that's
creative.
uh, my exploration into the business world. Uh, there's a lot of information there. The the spectator story is on Patrick Williams Stay Creative, and that's it's a fun story. I just shared it with a new friend, and she loved it. Uh, and I have 3 Instagram
Yes, you do.
sites. Last night we went back and forth. That was great. I love that. Uh, I have PMW Creativity,
Yes.
which is a new drawing every day, and I'm just about a month away from breaking 3,000
Wow.
drawings, and they're all different. Uh, and and then there is PMW under slash camera,
Right.
which is I post a photograph every day that I've taken on my phone. Uh, and then a new site, PMW under slash painting. And that's where I'm posting and writing a little bit about what I'm working on right now. And if you go back, I just finished a commission for a close friend from a scene out of his book, and you can see literally the progression from the first day until it was done. And I'm with the best of in the best of all possible worlds. I'm going to be starting a Substack that is um, going kind of wedded with the Instagram. So I'll send you kind of a connection when that happens, and I'll put it up on my PMW_painting Instagram when that happens. But that's pretty much uh, me media wise.
Hmm. Yeah, Patrick Williams it has a lot of your paintings that the Instagrams do. I was looking at them and your drawings. Oh my goodness, your mind is just is absolutely incredible, and I really enjoy. I look for it every day. And Patrick, thank you so much. Next time I'm in Omaha, we'll have to get a cup of tea.
Excellent. I look forward to it, Joey.
You be well. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Thank you for listening and or viewing Joey Pinz Discipline Conversations. Please share this episode with one or two of your friends who you think may benefit from the episode. Our website, www.joeypins.com. There you'll find lots of resources and you could join our mailing list. Please follow us on all our social media, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Podcast information, the video version of our podcast is on YouTube. Please subscribe. Audio is on all major podcasting platforms. Please follow them. And if you like it, please consider giving 5-star rating. Would really appreciate that. Thank you again for listening or watching Joey Pinz Discipline Conversations.